Hi, everyone. This is really an important video slash webinar, depending on whether you're watching live or by recording. This one and the one that I'll do next week for doctoral students are, in my opinion, an hour spent watching the system and having a conversation, and then probably another hour or two on your own doing the exercise. And all of a sudden, a whole lot of your final work, all your classwork will make more sense, or potentially make more sense, and your final work will go much easier. It is that good to know ahead of time where you're going. So, welcome to everyone here. And let's get started. So the question really is, when you're charting your way through graduate school, what's harder, breaking trail or following a path you've checked out ahead of time? And I don't know if any of you have ever done cross-country skiing, but I have, and breaking trail, especially in deep powder, is just exhausting. And that's what I think happens for the 50% of the people who start graduate school who don't finish, is that too often they are trying to do all the work like they are breaking trail. So kudos to everyone who's watching. You're going to be ahead of the pack. And Lewis Carroll reminds us that if we don't know where we're going, any road will get us there. So we will know where we're going. And this today is an exercise that I've done over a broad range of master's final projects, that you will then be able to take the same exercise and do it in your specific world. And the critical analysis is laid out for you. So we're going to look at some end products. We're going to set up a spreadsheet. We're going to do an in-depth discovery about the variety of master's output at the end that actually earns you the degree. And then there'll be analysis and discussion that you can have here, and I'll turn on mics. If you want to turn on mics, we can talk about it. So, and then a Q&A at the end. Okay. There is a handout. The handout gives you the spreadsheet that I am working from. What did I do? I went to ProQuest and I searched for both a wide range of PhD and a master's outputs. And I searched for outputs across a wide range of programs. So you are in your program and you're going to be responsible for making this work so that at the end, not only will you have the overview that we're discussing today, but you'll know how to drill in to your own and get the answers that will serve you. So let me just get you kind of acclimated. Oops, wrong one. I'm going to, bear with me a second, while I put on, I guess they call it this now. Oh, they're not giving me, there it is. So this is the screen, and I'm going to share it. I have to move you over so I can find the button to share with. And come on, get to the enter button. There we go. All right, now move you back over here and we're set. So you are seeing the spreadsheet that you are that you can download. So I've given all of this to you. And after this, if you're interested in next week's for the doctoral work, because many of you are probably also thinking in terms of using your master's to go for a PhD later, the same exercise will be done for them next week. And the spreadsheet that will be up on the pd.education website will have both sheets worked out. Right now, I've only done the master's work. But I did go to ProQuest and I did look up 30 some different kinds of outputs. And I'm showing you what the degree is in and what the degree was, and then what the program was. And then I've given you the links. So you have empowered to follow this through, to watch the video later and go back and do it if you need to do that. All right, so what are we doing? We're, the first step here is for you to do what I did, find models. Now, what's a model? A model is something that you can critically analyze. It does not have to be a good example of your final work. It can just be any example. And then you need a number of them. But in an ideal world, you might you might go to your program and find examples of people who have graduated from your program. If you have a specific advisor, you certainly want to see if there's a model from someone that graduated under them, because they have some specific ideas that you might see come forward. You also might want to look in the broader world of master's work, as I did here, and find some that were spectacular for some reason. And at the end of today's conversation, you'll know what to look for. And you might, and then in that, you'll be looking at them. And hopefully you'll find one that you just think is really well written, that the person who wrote it speaks to you and says, and you say, whoa, I wish I could write that well. You really want to capture that. Anytime you see it in academic writing, you want to capture that kind of interest, because in fairness, academic writing is not easy. It's much easier to put people to sleep than it is to keep them interested when you talk in depth about very finite ideas. Okay, so also though, you might just talk to people in your program or people who've recently graduated from your program and ask to see theirs. That's a huge compliment to them, and most of the time they'll be delighted to show it to you. And then they'll also have a substantive conversation with you about whether or not it was hard to do. Now, and then finally, if you are doing a research master's, then you have the methodology that you're thinking about using, and the topic areas. All of you are doing a review of literature, I'm pretty sure. And so then you'll find things within the literature. Just start building a pile of PDFs or things to look through later. At the end of your degree, you can throw them all away, but in the meantime, they're really, really useful. And I've given the slides are there for you, and I've given you a link that will help you find more about models. So step one, you do what I did. You build a spreadsheet out of models, and I found it easy to use these columns. The title, whether it was a master's or a PhD, it's helpful for you to maybe look at the same topic area you've got, but at a higher degree level, so you can see the lay of the land, so to speak. And then you always want to capture the URL, because you always want to go back and find it later. So then I sorted. And so these are my masters. And you can see it's over a broad range of things. And now we can start to do the deeper dive. Right? So once you've got your stuff all together, what am I suggesting you would find useful to do an analysis of? I'm suggesting that titles are really important. If you want your work to have legs after you graduate, then for heaven's sakes, figure out a title that's interesting enough that it'll stand out from the crowd, and somebody will want to look at it. First step in today's world, when there's every possible piece of data out there. If you want your work to be read by anybody else after you're done, then you have to grab them. So that's the titles. We're going to also go out, and then I'll go through that in more detail, but we're going to talk about the argument, we're going to talk about formatting, we're going to talk about readability and conclusion. So let's look at titles first. These are the titles of the masters. Now, I'm going to put it on to you who are in the room. Looking at these titles, now they may not be anything like your topic area. So it would be good, actually, if the people in the room might write in what your program area is, because I know typically we have some soil scientists, we have some architects, I know because Erica's here, she's an archaeologist. So we have people from a wide range, and I am simply not able to find an example today for all of that range, but that makes a lot of difference in these titles. So take a look at them, and then if you would here, type in ones that stick out for good or bad. And you can just say the engineering one about Kalman filters. You don't have to write out the whole thing. Sometimes they're long. So I'll let everybody do a bit of analysis now, and then we can talk about which of these titles do you think people would click on and why? Yes. In fact, I chose The New Negro Has No Fear because it was so provocative. But then you look at it more deeply, and it's an MFA. So it's a fine arts thesis. And then we know that it's going into African American art, and the fact that more recent African American painting, perhaps this artist's painting, are able to discuss aspects of racism that would not have been allowed earlier. But it certainly is a title that makes you go, whoa. Log discovery, log custody, and the web, inspired approach for open distributed systems troubleshooting. Okay, so Erica, improving public perceptions of water resource policies through the use of online simulations and visual dialogue. Let's compare those two. I'm just saying they are very specific. Chose them as they tell you what it is about. Excellent. You definitely want, because who's going to, most likely, where is your work going to go after you graduate? Most likely, it's going to go first and foremost to other academics. And why are they looking at it? They're looking at it because they're going to potentially use it in the lit review. And how do you grow academically? By getting cited. So all of that is part of your pragmatic thinking when you're writing your title. But let's look at the top one, even though it's a business one. Why be a great woman artist when you could be spectacular, the study of women old masters in art history canon through art market bias. So it's very specific about what it is, but they also gave us a bit of a jazzy, sexy title. Just to say, and some of you are doing very finite science, and so you absolutely want to have a title that tells everybody the specific area a finite area you're working in. You know your field, and you know what's going to grab people in your field. It might not be sexy. Maybe the fact that you're doing it is sexy. So role for identity, a study of tabletop role-playing games and exploring identity. Title is a bit long, but the role for identity is catchy because it's a tabletop game. I thought so too, Jordan. It's exactly why I read it. And so you got the idea. There is something to think about. And when you're choosing models, do this. Look at them. Highlight the ones you like. Keep it in the back of your mind. I don't mind looking at a title for a master's degree and giving an honest opinion later. Of course, I don't mind. We'll put that on the end, Erica. Although you could throw it up now if you wanted to. I don't think the people in the room would mind giving you honest feedback either. And another thing that would be interesting probably for all of you is to know who, you might want to raise your little hand in the chat box if you will graduate this year. Just to show who's in the end game versus who's in the beginning. So we might see some hands go up because some of you might be close to the end. And then you're definitely getting, Erica, go ahead, put it in. It's fine. All right. We like these to be as interactive as we can. Okay, so, and none of you are surprised that she is that she's in the end game because she's asking a question like that. Patterns of Pilwi, a multi-sensor remote sensing approach to detecting and characterizing archaeological sites in savanna woodland environment. So, I don't know if we have other people in the room who might understand your language. I know a bit about it. So, but you are using words that make the assumption that your reader, that the common reader who you think you would appeal to would understand patterns of Pilwi, would understand multi-sensor and remote sensing. And is there a way, it's just a little awkward in English to have sensor and sensing so close together. Actually, for a broader range of people. So what's sexy about your work? Certainly the fact, the technological use is, you're doing some very unusual things, but or is it the archaeological sites, which is going to be the more interesting piece for your reader, and then put that in order in your title. So it might be studying archaeological sites in savanna woodland environments using multi-sensor remote sensing approach, and or whatever. So just thoughts. And there is no right. So now this leads me to a really good discussion, that all of you will put your work up against other academics and they will give you ideas, like I just gave Erica ideas. Keep in mind that they are just their opinions and ideas. I encourage all of you to find your own voice, and the firmer you can have your own voice in your work, the more your work will have legs, because it will be authentically from you. The more you kind of get pushed around by other stronger academics' voices, you might find that a tension to work with. So I'm just a voice. I'm a strong voice, but I'm just a voice. And at the end of the day, I want you to develop your voices. Okay, argumentation. Now, you may or may not have had any study of argumentation. If you haven't, the pd.education website has a lot of help for you. But basically, in an argument, you are making a claim about something. You are displaying the evidence that backs up that claim, and you're telling your reader how that evidence actually does back up the claim. You're making it obvious. You're unpacking it for the reader, which is called the warrant. And all of that drives you to a conclusion that your claim is valid. Every document you will be doing for your final work will have an argument. And if you know and you've thought about your argument ahead of time, and you are very clear in what it is, your abstract will be better, your writing will be stronger, you'll have less redundancy, etc. So I'm helping you here. And all of these things should be found easily enough in the abstract. So we'll look at some of these. Okay, and then there are, I actually didn't, so now just to show you where we are as far as now I'm going to move on to this master analysis. And I'm realizing I should have inserted a row here, and that row, I should have copied the abstract. Or I could have copied the abstract, and then I would have put the abstract in each one. So we'll look at a couple of abstracts. Let's do that now. Thank you. All right, let me say that again. I read, and I'll read it again. We're looking at the argument, and I'm reading the abstract from one of these that's in the group. Within recent years, technology has become more integrated with students learning in school. But yet, I'm just going to paraphrase, with COVID, science teachers were forced to switch to online distance learning. They had to pivot their lessons, which led to the challenge of having to figure out how to teach online. Prior materials were not created for distant learning. That's the first 7 sentences. Then it says, a unit was created for distant inquiry on the topics of conservation of energy. At the middle school level, the unit was reviewed by experts. They made comments and reflections were taken into considerations, and a modification was made. Okay, does this author make a claim? Scale of 1 to 5, 1 is not at all, 2 is, or 5 is yes, absolutely, you heard the claim. I'll show you on the screen. 3. Okay, so what would you say the claim was? Right in the middle, it's neutral. Some a little less than that. It's interesting, isn't it? It implies a claim. It implies that education will get better if and to the extent that it was difficult to pivot from face-to-face to online. Everybody knows that was true. The materials weren't made for that. All of those things, yes. And it implies that the education would be better because this other process that it's going to tell you about went on. But, and this is a problem with all education, education is very difficult to get to a scientific level because it's very difficult to prove, to really have results that show how much better it was afterwards than before, because of course you didn't teach it before. You don't have a baseline, you don't have any measurements. So probably, maybe this was as strong as this person felt like they could go. However, I'm with you. You can make a strong case here. There isn't a very strong claim. Watch out for that. And you watch out for that in 2 ways. One way is that you set up whatever it is you are studying with the idea of the claim you want to make, and you test yourself that the claim, that it matches up, that you'll get a claim out of it. So he could have been stronger here by saying, even though it is very difficult to show improvement in educational formats, this particular process was able to do, and that would have been the evidence. Then his writing, what he wrote about was a process. It's a very strong process piece, and we'll talk more about what he did. It is a very strong process piece, and many of you as master's students will be primarily involved in the process of what you do, but be aware that at the end of the day, whether or not what you do is going to make an impact or going to give you the foundation you want to step out on has a lot to do with whether or not it makes a claim, and the reader can see how the evidence leads to that claim. Okay, same author that I used here. And what I'm telling you is that you can do an awful lot because of your table of contents. So if we go back to the screen here, you'll see that what I've done is take their table of contents. 3 of the 4 of them, the entire table of contents fit in one kind of elongated column or sheet row. The second one went on and on and on, and I'll use it as an example in a minute about being aware of the scope of your project. But if your entire table of contents will fit in and this is appropriate for a master's, that it would be long, and you will see when you pull out your models how long your master's is compared to other masters coming out of your program. And you don't want to overwork an academic piece. It's very interesting, but it isn't the work that will launch your career or take you further. It's a stepping stone. It's an academic stepping stone. So you want to do great work, but you don't want to do great work that takes you the rest of your lives. So, although some people do and they have a great time with it, I mean, but most people really want to graduate. Okay, so what am I saying? That this particular one this is a basic scientific format. You overview the project, you do a literature review, you outline the methodology that got you your results or your feedback, and then you have some conclusions and you throw all the odd bits and pieces in the appendices at the end. This particular one was 58 pages long. If we go back to the screen, let me show you the second one I picked up, which was the Asperger's syndrome person. It was a heuristic study, meaning a self-study of he had Asperger's and he was going for a master's degree, and he was studying the effect of his neurodiversity on the whole degree process. So you see in his case, which is the second column here, I think you can see my green hand on my screen. I would expect this level of table of contents for a PhD. It's about 16 pages of a beginning, another 40 pages of lit, and then we get into results, in total 126 pages. So very detailed. And again, what you're doing with this exercise for yourself is you are guiding your ship towards the outcome you want. So if you have a fascinating thing and you have the time in the world to do this, and writing 125 pages fits who you are and what you want to do with this, go for it. This man did a fabulous job. But if this doesn't fit, it's much better that you know it now than when you're halfway or 2/3 of the way through 125 pages and you really are thinking, I wish I could have done this in 50. So we're looking at the formatting, the arrangement of them, and the research protocols. So this basic one here is basic research protocol. The second one is also research protocol, which is really just to say you introduce it, you give us the lit, you tell us how you measured it, you give us the results separate from what you think about the results, Then you tell us what you think about the results, the findings, and give us a conclusion of what it all means. So it's 5 basic steps in a research protocol. The first one certainly is. The second one certainly is. Each one is very heavily brought out. The third one says is a workshop. And it's really discussing a workshop. Then there's a summary about what happened, how it's applied, and it's a discussion. So it is not a research. If you don't have to do research, you might want to look more carefully at the third column. And the fourth one is also very strong. It's a introduction, the materials and the methods, the results. There is no particular literature in the fourth one. So just to show you that across master's work, there's quite a range. You have to know where you will be on that range. So these are the questions I think you want to ask. I think you want to look at the models that you find, and you want to see the table of contents, and you want to pull them out and see whether yours is more like the column 2 or the column 1, or how in-depth is it? Is it a research format? How many references did they have? You know, we're academics. We have to read other people's work. So out of the group that I chose, the first one had 40 references. The second one, that's the long one, had 170 references. Again, that's what I'd expect in a PhD. The third one had 30, and the fourth one had 45. So it's good to see a range. It's good to see where it is, and you feel more comfortable as you go forward when you know you're in the middle of that range. And then you want to look more carefully at the table of contents if it is required, and there is one, because you want to ask whether or not the table of contents, whether you have this piece that you're looking at for your model explicitly has a conceptual or theoretical framework. And that's kind of a nuanced writing and academic work, and it may or may not be appropriate to your field, and it's easy to find by simply looking up, doing a search on the word framework and seeing whether or not one is mentioned in the PDFs that you're looking at. And of the ones we looked at, the first one had a framework, the second one loosely had a framework, and the last two did not. What frameworks do is they help us tell our reader what we are doing. They kind of build a foundation that then we put our ideas on top of. And many authors find them useful to help the reader unpack the kind of subtle stuff that we're writing about. Okay, now readability. I did not look at each one of these for that, but basics of readability. You're looking for something that uses as little jargon as possible. It has very few redundancies. Every heading is opened with a strong sentence that brings the reader in. Each paragraph makes one point, and every paragraph under a heading adds up to something that we could have guessed was going to be there when we read the heading. And then your reader always knows where they are going and where they have been. So it's useful to say, in the last section we did this, and in this section we're going to carry it forward of doing this. These are relatively long and complex documents to read, and it helps the reader have pace and know where they are going. So those are just basics, but I recommend that you find your models and you ask yourself, to what extent did your authors do these things? And then it had better come to a strong conclusion. Many times these documents the conclusion is the only thing anybody's ever going to read. I would look through the table of contents and I would establish kind of your idea pattern. And then I would run to the conclusion to see what it was that you were telling me that was useful. If it was useful to me as well as to yourself, then I would go back and find the parts that were useful that I could pull out and use and cite you in my own work. So your conclusion needs, since it might be the only thing they're reading, you do have to remind your reader of the purpose of what you're doing, the basic flow of how your research went, and if it is research, and the findings. Now, some of the examples that I set up for you are not research in that extent. They are art pieces, going for literature and the humanities. So not everything will follow this research pattern, but the logic of the research pattern is useful when it because if you know it, it will help underpin your writing as well. At the end, your work will take your reader to the next step. What it means to your field, maybe what it meant to you personally, and where you think it should go next, which also might be how what you did compares to the rest of the literature in your field. So I've given you the basic things to look for. Now, what's next? Well, what's next, I hope, is that I've inspired you to think about where you're going to be going on your own journey. And I suggest that you might just make a Likert scale of 1 to 5, just like we did for the titles. You might find 4 or 5 models, lay them out like we did, and then build a Likert scale for each one. Did they build an argument? What do you think of their formatting, their readability? It's quite possible you're going to like the title from this one, the argument from this one. This one really is the format you're going to use because it was really easy. And then this one spoke to the reader well. Great. You have them all marked up. You've got different yellow colored tabs on them. They're on your desk. And when it comes time for you, maybe a long time from now, maybe tomorrow, to be putting together your own final document, you have something to compare your work with, because the actual writing of big academic documents is that at some point our brains go a little mushy, and it's really useful to take a day off writing and then to pull out a model and to say, oh yeah, I really like the way this person did this part. Let me just look at that part for my work and see if I can find some ways to improve it. It's really hard to edit our own stuff, and models help us do that. At the end, what we are all doing as we guide our ships through all the work that's going on in our academic world is where we want ours to be. As good as that person over there, better than this person here. And we can only shoot for some of those people that are like the stars of our particular world. So that leads me into this idea of separating the good from the great. And you perhaps, I find oftentimes the people who come to these webinars are people who are very interested in separating the good from the great, and they want themselves to be on the great part. So if that is you, a little bit about PD education. We have about 600 videos to help you find the subtleties of where you are in the graduate world. And as a master's student, you probably won't need the full range, but there are subtle ideas here. And so frequently when we post things you might want to look at, we post the more basic ideas because obviously you want everyone to make sure they have those. But this particular set that I pulled out for you today are what I call the medium level subtleties. I don't know if you know how to read a URL, but at the end you find the title. So when it comes on finding and using models, I pulled 2. One is finding model dissertations. It's the overview of where you find them if you're looking for award winners and that kind of thing. And then the next one is arguments, theories, and concepts, testing yours against the models. Again, a little bit more subtleties there that you might find interesting. On writing, how to set up headings to avoid redundancy, because it is really easy to say the same thing over and over and over again in 3 different ways and not even know we've done it. So our headings can help us do that. And as an author, I find that the headings are so important. Also, if you're new to this world and you don't have every Microsoft Word skill that you'd ever want to have, if you go into PD Education and you search on MS Word, we have a dozen. Oh, and also if you go to webinars, I think you can pull down the MS Word section. And I've done a lot of shorter 15-minute type videos on how to set up Word to be your friend when you write academically. And headings are a major section of that. Then we have self-voice, expert voice in academic writing. It is important to know how we talk when we write academically. And for those of you who might be doing research and you're kind of in this world, there's some practical tips translating research language from one field to another. And the more our global environment has a lot of cross-play between fields, that can be very important. You can find some great ideas, but they're in quantum physics and you're in humanities. So what do you do about that? And researchers, theoretical and conceptual frames are worth thinking about. And some of you will be required to do things for publication and then pull those things together. This happens more at the doctoral level than it does at the master's level, but in this academic world of ours, people realize that publication is important, and if you can get things published, great. If you are interested in publication, PD Education has a lot for you on that. Just type in the word publication and you'll find it. But there's a specific one there for the 3 chapters. Okay, so now you have me to ask questions of, if you want to raise your hand, if you want to use your microphone, you can raise your hand and we can just have a conversation, but you found it easy to type earlier, so that's good too. Some of you are on phones, I see, so it might be easier to talk. And trying to make this then as useful for you as it can be. And for that, I think I'll stop the recording so that people who are watching by recording, which is the rest of the people who signed up, glad you came, glad you looked at it. And you can always go to Siobhan, I'll type it in here, SIOBHAN at pd.education. And she'll help you find stuff if you can't find it on the site. Okay, so off comes the recording. And then if you're in the room, ask me questions. I'm happy